From the Adama journals. One day, when there was a lull in the war and we were off doing convoy duty for some ships carrying supplies to a fueling station under construction, I noticed Starbuck running down a corridor, muttering to himself and making furious entries in a little notebook. Now, when it came to military matters, Starbuck was the proverbial innocent ensign. If you could take a peep at them, you'd have expected his diapers to be as green as he was. But when it came to money matters, especially when the money could be wagered, Starbuck had been born adult. In his first week on the Galactica, he had maneuvered so many people into so many corners that everybody was walking around round-shouldered. By this particular time, I thought I was on to the shrewd young man, so I decided to see what he was up to. I figured if I could catch him in the act of some illegal enterprise, I could apply a little discipline and get him to confine his sinning to the proper designated areas. He moved fast, and I had a hard time tailing him, since it's hard to be a very good shadow when you're the ship's commander. But I could soon see he was making for the medical section. Sure enough, when I caught up with him, he was in an empty ward. A bunch of the medics were gathered around him, hollering dates at him, and passing him little slips of paper with what appeared to be a good amount of money. Starbuck was very busy, somehow managing to write things in the notebook and take the money and the slips. "What's going on here, Ensign?" I hollered in my best authoritarian voice. "Some off-hours gambling?" Starbuck began to look very sheepish, very much the Green Ensign. I'm sorry, Skipper," he said in a soft voice. The diabolical louse knew I hated to be called Skipper, but I ignored that. "And what's the subject of your little swindle this time, Starbuck?" All the medics began to look apprehensive, and I thought Ensign Starbuck might sink through the metal floor. "Well, sir, we're betting on... Out with it, Ensign. I want to know what this is all about before I confiscate everything for the ship's pension fund." "Sir, we're getting together this little bet on the day you'll die, sir." I have to admit, I was taken aback by that reply, and couldn't speak for a moment. You're all betting on the date of my death?" He nodded. I sputtered a bit more on the subject, then demanded that Starbuck turn over the betting money to me. It began to dawn on me that the money in his hand was fake, the kind of lead cubit used by non-bettors in card games. "Just as well I got caught," Starbuck said to the medics. "Skip's right. It's a swindle. The fix was in." I felt a little unsettled in my stomach. "Fix?" I said, choking a bit on the word. "Yes," Starbuck smiled. "I was going to win, no doubt." "You were going to win? You know the date of my death?" "Yep." As he stood before me and smiled smugly, I felt like strangling him. "All right, Starbuck. Tell me your winning bet. I'm especially interested in the part about the fix. When am I going to die?" Smiling, he handed me a betting slip that he'd been holding. "My prediction," he announced. I opened it up. It said, "Never." Then Starbuck started laughing and handed me a neat pile of fake cubits. "Never," he said. I'd been suckered. Standing in the middle of an enormous empty sickbay ward, I was backed into a corner. I joined in the laughter and ignored the insubordinate character of the whole episode. Starbuck showed me all the slips. They all said never. I never tried to catch Starbuck out again. Battlestar Galactica by Glenn A. Larson and Robert Thurston. Chapter 6. Starbuck stole a cigar from Boomer and slipped away from the work party to his special hideaway by his ship in the Galactica's launching bay. Fitting himself into a dark wall niche, he lit the cigar and leaned his head back against the metal wall. Almost immediately, he felt himself dozing off, and a cautious part of his mind wondered if he should do something about the cigar. Then he couldn't think straight. What cigar? He almost said aloud. Visions of a starving mob coming in and out of light initiated a dream that never developed into a full-fledged nightmare, because the sound of Cassiopeia's voice startled him awake.
"Starbuck?"
she said.
"What are you doing crouched in that hole?"
He realized that the cigar was about to fall out of his hand, and he tightened his grip on it. Moving out of the niche, he put the cigar to his mouth and took a long puff. The smoke that lingered in his nostrils had a faintly narcotic feeling to it, the result, no doubt, of one of Boomer's extra special blends. Cassiopeia had bathed and put on fresh clothes, a one-piece clinging outfit that threatened to become transparent in the right light, since Starbuck had left her at the nurse's quarters. By all conventional measurements of beauty, she was quite stunning now, but Starbuck briefly wondered if he did not prefer the look of her in her previous smudged and disheveled state. There'd been a vulnerability about her then, a need to be helped that he had enjoyed responding to. Now she stood before him, tall and attractive and strong. Another strong woman, like Athena. He always found himself attracted to strong women. But there were times, moments of false nostalgia, when he almost wished for one of the weak, submissive maidens of intergalactic legend. A foolish thought, maybe. He knew he would be bored by such a maiden in less than a day, and the only real benefit obtained for someone like Starbuck would be a much-needed rest. "How'd you find me?" he asked.
"Followed you part way. Lost you here. Then I saw the light of that sweet-smelling cigar. Can I have a puff?"
"Sure." She took a heavy drag on the slim cigar and appeared to savor its taste.
"Oh, thank you. That joystick's been efficiently doctored."
"My friend's an expert at the chemical alteration of cell composition."
"My compliments to the botanist, then."
She took a couple of steps backward and looked up at Starbuck's ship. Jenny and the rest of Starbuck's flight crew had done an excellent job of repair work on it, replacing the parts that had been destroyed by his crash landing, and generally tuning up all its systems. As always, they had superbly polished its surface, and the pinpoints of light that seemed to spring out from its high gloss gave the impression that the Viper ship was performing its own strange abstract little dance. Cassiopeia stared at it a long time before speaking again.
"It's somehow beautiful, suspended up there like it's in permanent flight. A perfect machine, born to dance with joy, curve in and out of constellations."
"Nice way of putting it," Starbuck said, biting down on the cigar. Cassiopeia's eyebrows raised.
"But you don't buy it?"
"Too poetic. Leaves out the way the metal stinks when there's a fuel foul-up, the pain all over your skin when something shorts and starts sending sparks up your sleeves. Still, I get your drift, lady. I'd rather be in the cockpit of that junk heap and flying some boring duty than any other job I can think of." A headache was developing in what felt like spreading lines behind Starbuck's right eye. He squinted his eye and rubbed at his right temple.
"You look overworked,"
Cassiopeia said sympathetically. "Me? Overworked? Nah. I overwork myself just to get away from overwork. Still, it's been something of a strain these last few days. The work and the starving people and..."
"And Captain Apollo? I noticed he's been pushing you guys like a martinet. I almost expected some kind of mutiny."
Starbuck laughed. "Mutiny? I doubt that. Not against the captain, anyway. Too much trouble around anyway without playing revolution. No, I feel for Apollo. He's going through hell."
"Well, you're all suffering. I don't see why he should be singled out for it."
"No, I didn't mean that. Didn't mean just the ordinary misery that's facing everybody. Apollo lost his brother in the Cylon attack, and he's pretty broken up about it. That's where his irritability comes from."
"Oh, I didn't know."
"Certain kinds of scuttlebutt we don't allow to filter down to the civilian levels."
"You guys protect each other. I like that. Back home, we always felt that spacer pilots thought too much of themselves. I'm glad to see..."
"Yeah? Well, it's no big deal. Protecting each other, like you say. Protecting each other is part of the job. You gotta protect a piece of a guy's private life just like he's gonna protect you when you got a pair of Cylon fighters blasting at your tail. Same thing, really.
Do you love me?
The abruptness of the question startled Starbuck. He did want to make love to her, but he didn't want her to ask the question.
What's the matter?
She said. Is that the way you go about it? Changing the subject and aiming right at the old target?
No, it isn't. If we were back on my planet and you were accepted by the proper segment of your society, and you had given me the signal that you loved me, even then I would not be able to ask the question. I don't want to love you as a socialator. I'm not one anymore, not really. I think the job's just a part of history now. I'm unemployed. I want to make love to you. That's all it is. Not as a socialator, not as a refugee. Just as me, okay?
I'll think about it. They stood and stared at each other for a very long time. Finally, Cassiopeia said,
Have you thought about it?
I'm inclined favorably.
Do you ever take that smoldering weed out of your mouth?
He removed the cigar and tossed it onto the launching bay floor. It landed lit end first and sent sparks flying. After they had kissed, Starbuck said, If I'd have known that was the prize, I'd have prepared a speech.
I've heard all the speeches.
Would you mind if we didn't spend much more time in this launching bay?
Can you think of any place more pleasant?
Come to think of it, I can't think of any place pleasant in this whole fleet.
What's in there?
That's the launching tube. You don't want to go in there. Cassiopeia had already walked into the tube through a circular side opening. Her hand gestured toward him. He looked all around the launching bay, even up at the ceiling. Lord, he said, I'll do anything you ask tomorrow. Just don't call in alert tonight. Athena had a strong hunch something was wrong. Starbuck had not been where he was supposed to be. When Starbuck was not in the proper place, he was up to something. That was an axiom among everyone who knew the brash young lieutenant. She had glimpsed him earlier, giving more than the usual attention to a bedraggled woman who, from a distance, appeared to be sexy in spite of her scraggly condition. As she strolled onto the bridge of the Galactica and saw that it was deserted except for the ever-vigilant Colonel Ty, she wondered if her weariness was not just making her overly suspicious of Starbuck. You seem tired, Ty said. Why don't you steal a nap?
There's just so much to do. Preparing for this hyperspace jump, educating the people. Some of them think we're just skipping out.
No way you can help that, Athena. They won't really believe us until we bring them back the fuel and supplies.
You're more confident than I feel.
No point in not being confident, I always say.
Have you seen Lieutenant Starbuck?
You always take a while getting to what's really on your mind.
Have you seen him?
No, I don't think I... Wait, I did see him on one of the monitors earlier. Just before we shut down the flight deck, he was near his Viper. I think he was checking it out.
That makes sense, I guess.
That was a while ago. I'm sure he's long gone by now, getting a good night's sleep before the jump. Like I say, you should do the same. There'll be enough work from now on for all of us. She nodded, touching her briefly on the arm. He said goodbye and left the bridge. As soon as he had disappeared out the hatchway, Athena strode to the launch control console and stared for a long time at its monitor screens. Then, with an almost casual movement of her hand, she reached down and flipped a switch. On one of the monitor screens, she watched lights go on all over the fighter bay. No people were in evidence anywhere. Her finger eased over to another switch marked Launch Tubes. As the monitor lit up, Athena's face flushed crimson with anger as she recognized Starbuck and the tall woman she'd seen him with earlier.
That little snake,
she said aloud. Her finger quickly proceeded to another button. This one was marked Steam Purge. She tried to laugh, but could not as she watched the monitor screen in which the two stood amidst a rising cloud of steam. Starbuck screamed and, flinging the woman before him, vacated the launch tube in an all-expedient speed. Athena switched the monitor off quickly, but sat staring at it for a long time. When she ran a check on the launching bay later, neither Starbuck or the woman was in evidence. In her mind, she made promises which, even though she might never keep them, were delightful to contemplate. When Maron had developed her interstellar drive centuries ago, replacing the earlier, more cumbersome systems, there had been more than enough Tillium available on the discovered planets to keep all of the human spacecraft going, and the expense of extracting the fuel from its geological sources to convert it into its volatile liquid form seemed quite economical. However, human colony expansion followed by the 1,000-year war had depleted the supply of the only fuel source that could power the highly complicated Maron drive. In the time preceding the Cylon ambush, the price of Tillium had skyrocketed to the new levels due to the controls exerted by war profiteers like Count Baltar, who Adama had perceived always seemed to have sufficient amounts of the fuel to fulfill any request. There had been a question whether the fleet might have to cut down severely on its Tillium use. In fact, Adama felt the Tillium crisis had been at least partially responsible for the fussy politicians anxious to cut a budget, wherever even a small rip could be detected along a margin, rushing so eagerly into the Cylon peace trap. Now that they, the Galactica, and the few other ships able to make the jump through hyperspace, had arrived in the sector containing the planet Carillon, Adama devoutly hoped that the old rumors of this place as a prime black market source of the elusive fuel base were true. If not, he had left thousands of people in thousands of ships who would futilely watch for their return. Almost as soon as they had materialized in Carillon's solar system, the bridge scanner announced an obstacle for which they had not planned. Immediately, the commander called in his 3 best fighter pilots, Boomer, Starbuck, and Apollo, to brief them on their unexpected mission. "It appears," he told them, "that the skies around Carillon are heavily mined. They—" "Mined?" Apollo said. "But who would set up such a—" "For the moment, Captain, that's an irrelevant consideration. The point is that we cannot pass in order to get into position to accept supplies. Certainly the Galactica and our other larger ships can't make it through as things stand now. It's possible that a path through the mines can be found. I don't think the planet has been sealed off. The mines are clearly protective. We need to discover that path, and that will be the job of you 3. He paused to let the impact of the order sink in. "All right. We don't have time for elaborate searches. You'll have to navigate by scanner and sweep everything out of your path with turbo lasers. Any questions?" "It's my biopulse line, sir," Starbuck said. "Bad time for me to be cooped up in a cockpit. Would this be an appropriate time for me to take my sick leave?" Adama smiled. The 3 pilots laughed nervously. "It would," Adama said, "but request denied. I didn't arrive at you 3 to lead us through without a great deal of anguish." Apollo's eyes narrowed at his father's words. "You 3 control our fate. The rest of us will sit in anticipation of your skill." "Or lack thereof," Starbuck said, and Adama nodded. Apollo stayed behind after dismissal, touching his father's arm. He said, "Thanks." "For what? For selecting you for a dangerous mission, Apollo? If I could have excused you, I would." "No, it's not that at all." "What is it, then?" Apollo lowered his gaze to the bridge floor, a bit embarrassed. "Well, Father, it's just... Well, lately, I've been getting a lot of flack. That old clown Yuri insulting me during council, accusing me of being in league with you to deceive everybody. I mean, I think I've proven myself, but there are still people around here who attribute my rise through the ranks as well-executed nepotism. When I arrested Yuri, he accused me of a political ploy, threatening to appropriate the Rising Star simply to collect fuel for the Galactica. And then there are the dissidents. Stop it there. I shouldn't let you go on about it. There are many things we can't talk about, not in this place, at this time. Maybe later. He tried to say something more, but could just repeat, maybe later. Sure. I'll go work up a list of complaints. Apollo, if it's any consolation, there's one thing I've observed about this damn minefield. What? Every mine satellite is firmly in orbit. No sign of a decaying orbit anywhere. The implication is strong that the minefield is maintained on a regular basis, and that there has to be somebody down there on Carillon's surface. And it's a good chance they're mining Tillium, right? Right. They've got to be doing something sinister to bother with all this protection. Thanks for mentioning that, Apollo said. He looked at his chronometer. Well, I've got to hotfoot it now and check on my ship. As he watched Apollo stride out of the room, Adama felt pleased at the clues to a renewed confidence in his son. Perhaps all the new troubles had forced the memory of Zack's death to the back of his mind. Continuing troubles had a way of doing that. He wondered, too, if the improvement he perceived in Apollo was at all attributable to the charms of that lovely newswoman Serena, or the way she had directed his attention to the troubled boy Boxy. Athena sprang into the room as if she'd been crouching by the doorway, awaiting Apollo's exit. She had a copy of the 3 pilots' orders clutched in her fist.
"Father," she said, "I can't believe you're doing this. Why couldn't you have listened to the others? Gone to Boreas instead of this filthy, dangerous place?"
For a moment, Adama felt terribly confused. It was difficult to shift his concentration from the satisfaction over his son's confidence to this new disturbance from his other child. What is it, Athena?
You're taking such an awful chance with their lives.
Of course, they know that. They could back out without blame, you know that.
Ah, damn. Starbuck's too much of a fool to back out of a dangerous mission.
Adama was beginning to understand the source of her rage. It's Starbuck you're worrying about, is it? Her shoulders sagged suddenly, as all the rage seemed to go out of her in a rush.
It's not just that, Father. I'm worried about Apollo, too. You know that. And Boomer. It's just that I don't know what it is.
You love Starbuck, and you're naturally...
I hate that.
Another surprise. Adama took Athena in his arms and asked her what was wrong. Holding back her tears, she told him about her discovery of Starbuck and Cassiopeia making love in the launching tubes. Well, so you have to fight for your young man, Adama said. That's not so hard. You're a fighter. I'm proud of your courage and your...
Oh, shut up, Father. That's not what I want to hear. I'm just, I don't know, very disturbed, and I don't know what to think. I used to think I could cure myself of Starbuck, get a pill out of sickbay or something and forget about him. But I don't know. It's this war and the destruction of our home planets, and this desperate voyage to a place where we don't know what we'll find. Everything's in a different perspective now. Hopeless. That's why I'm so frightened about this mission. Everything's been hopeless since... If they survive this, if any of us survive this, what next? Will we find this Earth you claim isn't myth?
Perhaps not.
I was thinking that. We could grow old waiting. I mean, we may never have the chance to
form a permanent relationship, have children, and a home.
Yes.
You know, I think it's a bit premature for you to be worrying about your old age. I, on the other hand, ought to give a great deal of thought to this voyage. When we reassemble the fleet and my resignation as president of the council takes effect finally, then I...
Get that idea right out of your head. You're not going to resign. You have to lead them. You're all that's left.
We're recycling an old argument, which is not to the point right now. Athena hugged her father. She had not done that so spontaneously in some time, and he was happy to feel the tension between them alleviate.
Thanks for consoling me.
Just returning the favor. Remember when you had to console your old dad?
Well, I'm sorry if I spoke out of turn.
You're allowed it. After Athena had left, Adama sat alone for a long time, thinking about the conversations with Apollo and Athena, satisfied that whatever their arguments with him, at least they were on his side. As Starbuck waited for launch signal, his ship vibrated under him, as eager to get into action as he was. In his mind, he went over Ty's final briefing. All they had been able to discern through the scanners was that there were at least 3 types of mines in the field. There was the normal explosive type, which could blast to smithereens any ship that came into contact with it, plus any other craft within a kilometer's radius. A second kind seemed more instrument than weapon. It had electronic equipment all over its surface, and nobody aboard the Galactica had ever seen any mine like it, if indeed it was a mine. The third type created the most trouble. Rather than exploding, it sent off flashes of light, which had the intensity so concentrated they would blind anyone unlucky enough to set it off. Because of that danger, the 3 pilots had to fly the mission with their cockpits darkened and treated with a chemical to ward off the ray. Fine, Starbuck thought. If that had been the only kind of mine, but the chemical protection that opaqued the cockpit made it necessary for them to fly blind against all the mines, relying on their scanners to locate targets. In combat, Starbuck liked this kind of sea-of-the-pants flying, but not in a suicidal mine-detecting mission. Ty's voice came over the communicator, asking his pilots if they were ready. "Ready," Boomer's sturdy voice said. "I'm ready," came the cool sound of Apollo. "What about you, Starbuck?" "I'm not ready, but let's get it over with anyway." A short, tense pause. Then the launch light came on, and the 3 ships catapulted into space. Forming a neat triangular formation, they headed for the minefield. In the short interval of time it took to reach the field, Starbuck said a silent prayer to the goddess Luck, wishing her continued good health and a return of the favor. "I'm going in for preliminary scouting," Apollo said. Boomer and Starbuck simultaneously wished him luck. "Don't jinx me with good wishes," Apollo said, laughter in his voice. "All right, I'm going to make a sweep by the nearest My God!" "Apollo?" Starbuck yelled. "What's wrong?" There was an agonizing wait for an answer. "I found out what the mysterious mines were. They're not mines at all, really. They're electronic jammers. As soon as I got near that one, everything in this plane started going haywire, including the controls. I was able to wrest back command of the controls and jerk the plane out of its range. Otherwise, I think I'd have been sucked in, and then, I don't know, probably then it explodes. Come in carefully, you guys." Starbuck flew in slowly, keeping most of his attention on the scanner, so he could avoid the jamming mines. Boomer came in directly behind him. "Hey, Boomer," Starbuck said, "don't slipstream me." "Shows how much you know. There is no slipstream capability in spacecraft which... I know. We gotta stop you memorizing those manuals in your bunk. I was just using a figure of speech, and you give me academy lectures. I mean, get out on your own. Just trying to cash in on your luck, buggo. My luck has decidedly changed lately." On the scanner, one of the light mines was activated near the form of Apollo's fighter. "You all right, Apollo?" Starbuck said. "I'm fine. They were right about darkening the cockpit, though. I'd be blind now. Though I feel like I'm blind as it is. I can't see much. My scanner's doing an erratic dance, and it's getting hot. Very hot. I'm veering off. Anybody make out anything else on their scanner about this field?" "Negative," Starbuck said. "My scanner's burning up." "Mine's gone. Boomer said. I was afraid of that. The jamming's playing havoc with our instruments. We should have stayed in bed. A little late for that, I'd say, Starbuck said. What do we do? Only one thing I can think of, fellas, and it's not exactly the best Academy procedure. Seems to me we've gone by the book as long as it's feasible. Our only chance is to haul off, hold positions, and blast away. You mean run a path right through the minefield? Starbuck said. With our scanners out of whack and our cockpits dark? Does it sound difficult to you, Starbuck? Oh no, duck soup, the nut's easy as pie. What if we miss a mine? Boomer said. One of us will be the first to know it. You with me? I'm with you. I'm with you too, Starbuck said. With that, Apollo said, Let's fly.